Hey everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about Coyote Swap Fox bodies. I read all over the internet and I see it all the time. People asking a lot, basically how much does it cost to Coyote Swap a Fox body? Well, that really is a loaded question and it depends on a lot of things. Where do you source your parts? Did you buy a new crate motor? You know, this and that. So what I'm going to talk to you about is my Coyote Swap Fox body, what it cost me, what parts I used, and stuff like that. I'm not going to include in the price like rear suspension, paint, interior, and all that. Obviously, it's not done to mine, but I wouldn't include it anyway because if you were, whether it was an LS motor, small block Ford, or a Coyote, you would probably still do those things to it. So those will be out of the equation. What I'm just going to tell you is the parts that it took to take a Coyote motor, put it in my car the exact way it was, and get it running. So what I'll do is I'll show you the car. We'll kind of get a quick look at it, and then after that, I'll do some talking about the parts that I used. And then I'll show you an exact parts list, where I bought it from, how much it was, and the end total of what it cost me to actually do the swap. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and take a look at the car. All right, so as you can see, the car obviously needs work. Paint's not great. Ground effects aren't that great. It's got these little ROH rims. Actually came on it from the factory. The car is originally 91 Steeda. Number 91-002, so it was the second made that year. It came with four-wheel disc brakes from the factory. I think it had a 275 horse, obviously 5.0 in it. I've actually got the build sheet for this car from Steeda, of every part and everything they put on it. Only thing that's really been added to the body is that 4-inch hood. And obviously it suffers from what normal Fox bodies suffer from, and is that quarter window trim is all eaten up. I've got to take those windows out and get them sent off and get them redone. That's why that piece of tape's there, so water doesn't seep down in there in between the body and that window. But like I said, car needs work, but it does run with the Coyote motor. So now I'll take you over and look at the motor. And obviously here's the engine. As you can see, it's not a show car. Basically the way it was when I got it, sitting for 10 years. I just swapped the Coyote motor in here. And like I said, I will go over all the parts I used after this and how well they fit or didn't fit, or what kind of fabricating I had to do to get it to work. All right, for the interior, the car already had the Sparco seats in it. It already had that odometer gauge cluster in there. There's the Holley 3.5-inch screen. And then you can see I've got the HP computer sitting down there. So now I'm going to do a quick rundown of the parts I used, why I used them, and kind of where I sourced them from. It'll just really be the big parts. I've got a list that I'll put at the end of this video. It'll have all the small parts, you know, how much they were and where I got them from for the total price of the build, but I'll just go over the big ones that I have right now. So I've got the list down in front of me, so you'll see me keep looking down, but it's just for me to keep reference. So I started out with a 2016 F-150 motor. I got it from a salvage yard. It had 16,000 miles on it, and I got it for about 2,100 bucks. The reason I chose an F-150 motor over the Mustang motor is because they're about half the price, and the only differences that I'm aware of. The intake's different, all 4 cams are different, the exhaust phaser is different, and the Mustang has 11-to-1, where the F-150 has 10.5-to-1 compression. So those are the only differences that I'm aware of. So I started with the F-150 motor. I changed all 4 camshafts to the Mustang camshafts. And obviously I changed the exhaust phaser, like I'd mentioned before, to the Mustang exhaust phaser. I went ahead and put the boundary billet oil pump gears and crank sprocket because I already had the timing cover off. The one thing that Ford recommends, and I know a lot of guys reuse them, but a lot of the bolts on this motor are torque to yield. So Ford says you can only use them once, but since I already had them off, I went ahead and bought the ARP cam phaser bolts and the ARP cam tower bolts. They weren't that much more expensive than the regular ones from Ford, so I went ahead and got those. I kept the F-150 oil pan, but I just used the 2016 Mustang oil pan gasket / windage tray. The computer system I went with was the Holley HP instead of the Ford Racing Control Pack. I know at the time when I was looking at it, the Ford Racing Control Pack was like $1,700. I looked around and looked around and looked around and finally found a guy, I think it was on one of the Facebook groups, I can't remember which one it was, that abandoned his swap, and he had a full Holley HP system with the VVT controller and everything for $2,100. So I figured by the time I paid $1,700 for the Ford Racing Control Pack and took it somewhere and had it tuned for $300 or $400, whatever that is, I'd have about that much in it, and I know the Holley system better. Since the car already had a TKO trans in it from the 408 build, I didn't have to buy a new trans, but I had to buy Tremec modular bell housing, you know, spec state 3+ clutch and a different flywheel. Fitting the motor in there, I used a UPR K-member and UPR A-arms with their coilover kit. A lot of guys I know that I've read had to put spacers in between the K-member and spacers in between the motor mounts. I didn't have to do that. Mine fit in there. It barely clears the oil pan and the steering rack, but it clears, and I didn't have to use any of that. I used BBK swap headers. The headers actually had no issues with. The driver's side, if I remember correctly, went on pretty easy with the motor in the car, but I had to lift the motor up and set it down in there with the passenger side on. That wouldn't fit on with the motor in the car. The car before had a Bassani X pipe for the 351 that was in it. Instead of buying and spending money on the BBK or whatever swap X pipe, I just went ahead and cut up that Bassani that was on there and just welded new ends on it and made it work. And since I was already planning on changing the intake from that F-150 intake, I went ahead and bought the Holley Coyote Sniper intake and the Coyote 90mm throttle body. So far, I love Holley's products. It's a very nice product, and it looks pretty damn good on the car, I think. A lot of guys I know are doing the Hydro Boost setup, but I don't. It's got manual steering, and since the car was 4-wheel disc brakes from Steeda, I didn't know if it would fit, but the master cylinder that came on it from Steeda was different than the normal 87-93 master cylinder that comes on these cars that people have to change. I got lucky again and didn't have to change mine, so I just reused it, so I didn't have to re-bleed the brakes or anything like that. Use the UPR 4.6 liter solid motor mounts. Like I said, all the UPR stuff with the motor mounts and the F-150 oil pan and all that, everything fit great. I didn't have to put spacers or do anything like that. I didn't have to. The headers fit great. I know a lot of guys have had issues with the headers not clearing. I've got a Stifler's cross member for the TKO. That went in good. I used the Boss 302 alternator kit. Some of the things that I bought, you know, they're decently expensive, but it's what I wanted. I changed the timing cover to a Mustang timing cover, and I also bought the Mustang oil filter adapter. I know some guys changed that from the F-150, or I had read that it basically, it either hits the steering rack or it hits the K-member if you leave the normal one on there. I don't know, so I went ahead and bought the Mustang one. I already had a Holley billet fuel pump and all that stuff on the car before, so I didn't have to buy that. If I could in this build use what was already on the car, I did. I reused the aluminum drive shaft that was already on the car. It fit perfect. And that's about it for a lot of the main things and kind of why I picked them or why I used them. At the end of this, again, I'll show you the exact breakdown of everything that I bought for the car, where I bought it from, what the part numbers are, and what the total is. So far, with everything on the car, it's cost me $10,109.86. I'm probably missing a couple little things here and there, but this exact parts list that I'm going to show you is exactly what's on my car. So hopefully that helps you guys with your builds. I know, like I said, I've heard this question a lot. How much does it cost? That is what it cost me just to get the car running. Nothing else. There's going to be more stuff that I'm putting on the car. I'm about to mini tub it. I'm about to put coilovers on it. I'm about to narrow the rear end. I'm about to start getting into that piece of it. But I would have done that regardless of whether it was a Coyote motor or whether it was a LS motor, a big block Chevy, big block, whatever it was. Those things would have already been done to it. So anyways, hope that helps. Remember, if you like it, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again.